Hello and welcome back to Idle Kingdom Defense. And today what we're talking about is what heroes are good, what heroes should you promote. I've had a lot of viewers ask me in the comments about, what hero should I promote? Can you make a video on the heroes? So today we're just going to talk about what heroes are useful and how are they useful. So we'll start off with the C tier. Ellie, she's not useful at all. Depending on your loadout, depending on what heroes you get, I got extremely lucky in this run and got Gabriel and Lucas right away. You may want to level Ellie up, but you shouldn't be looking to promote Ellie. She does do this defense debuff, which is okay, but she really doesn't do a lot of damage. You shouldn't be looking to spend a lot of Ascension Stones on promoting her, because Ascension Stones are basically the rarest ingredient you're going to get. So Ellie, hard pass. Now Luke, you obviously can tell from the fact that Luke is an uncommon 2-star in this run, that Luke is one of the best, if one of the best. He is the best support C-tier hero to promote. If you get Luke, feel you should use him. You should have no question about promoting him, because it keeps increasing his command battle buff, which every time it goes up increases the attack by another 40%. Of the heroes he's buffing attack. It doesn't use Luke's attack, it's the heroes that you're buffing and it buffs them. So Luke, hands down, best one in the C tier, and he will be an all-star that you will always use. Next up is Logan. Again, Logan's in the same boat. The thing is, you should never promote Logan, and I'll explain to you why. There's Carlos, who does the exact same thing of Logan, but he starts out with 6. There's Xavier, very good, but he starts out with 8 soldiers on the battlefield. And finally, there's Adrian, and Adrian starts out with 10. So the fact of the matter is that at this time, I don't believe there's any point in the future where you would need to use 4 summoning heroes to put all the troops on the battlefield. To put that in perspective, I would expect Adrian to have 18 troops at max status. Xavier should have 16, Carlos would have 14, and Logan could have 12. At this time, there's no reason to anticipate a stage that requires that many different troops all over the ground. So you can safely say that you don't need Logan, because he's basically redundant by better heroes. Now Mason, I didn't use Mason in my run. Some players at much higher stages than I am suggest that Mason could potentially be useful, but nobody has promoted him far enough, and the reason is he has a 3-second stun. So theoretically, as he would get promoted, this would go up to 90% for 3 seconds. And if you know how Mason works, he does attack in a line. Additionally, this would go up to 5 seconds. So Mason at a high promotion may be very useful, because he'd be stunning a line of enemy troops for up to 8 seconds. 90% of the time for 8 seconds, which is a very long stun, but nobody has promoted Mason enough to know how good he is. It could be that these values scale differently. We just don't know at this time, but he does have a good secondary effect of stunning. Moving on to the Warriors. Now, I used to think Diego is not very good, but that's incorrect, and it goes back to his stun. But again, nobody has promoted Diego all the way to Legendary to verify this, but he has Shockwave, which is a 20% chance to stun for 3 seconds. So the way this would theoretically scale up is it would be up to 60% for 6 seconds. And then this would be another 4 seconds when he gets max legendary. So we're looking at 5 seconds. So an 8-second stun, 60% chance for an 8-second stun, and his cooldown is 9 seconds. So theoretically, Diego could almost stun lock some of the enemies. So again, he might be really good. But we're talking about the very late game. In the early game, I wouldn't really recommend focusing a lot on Mason. or Diego. You're not going to really be focusing on these kind of stall tactics in the early game, because at the early game you're mostly worried about your DPS. So Mason. So again, just remember Mason and Diego have potential long game potential, but people that are interested in these characters have not promoted them to the level that they should be, so that we can really vet out that theory. Then there's Brian. Brian is a good early game hero, but the problem is with these early game heroes is as you get further and further in the game, your support heroes will make up more and more and more of your damage, meaning that the buff that Brian does to increase the damage of the warrior heroes means less and less, and that warrior heroes basically boil down into just being they have to stun. They have to stun, paralysis, slow. They have to do something like that. They have to crowd control, basically. And they have to soak damage. So that's all that warrior heroes really boil down to, really, in the late game. There's no use for them for a damage standpoint, which that makes Brian, he's good in the early game, because your warriors will actually be contributing, doing damage and stuff like that. But as you get later on in the stages, his utility becomes less and less, and your warriors contribute less and less to your overall damage. So again, the real standout is Luke. 100% Luke. He is the number 1 C tier hero by far. Potential underdogs that we don't have enough information about are Mason and Diego. All right, let's go down to B tier. Obviously, you can see that Tristan, who's been promoted to uncommon, he is clearly a top tier support hero, because if you pair Tristan and Luke together, their buffs basically stack, and his increase attack speed, which is amazing, so of course you should use both of those together, and that just increases the DPS of all your other support heroes. So Tristan, easy B tier hero, top tier. Carlos, I would consider Carlos, and you can see I used him and never promoted him. Carlos is what I would consider a transitional hero. He's basically, I would say, is the same as Logan, in that basically, since you wouldn't need 4 summoners, would you ever need 3 summoners on a map? Probably not. We haven't seen that. So because we haven't seen a need to have 3 summoners, Carlos wouldn't be useful, because your top summoners are Xavier and Adrian. And if you have a maxed out Adrian, there's no point to use Xavier. And if you have a maxed Xavier, there's no point to use Carlos. So with the way that tiering works, Carlos basically, use him when you get him because he's good, but don't invest a lot in him, because Carlos will eventually go back to the bunker and you won't see him again. Austin. Again, I didn't even use Austin. You might have to use him depending on if you don't have a lot of other good options. He is not a bad hero because he does have a stun. And again, Austin may be underrated because the potency of the stun might be more important on later waves. Because again, I would assume this would be a 3-second stun for up to 70% with a 9-second cooldown. And he would he theoretically, with his stun, should be able to stun for 8 seconds at 70%. But again, this is a very late game hero. So Austin might have late game potential, but he's probably not that great in the mid game. And again, but Austin's potential is unfounded at this time. We don't know. I don't know that anybody's made him a 5-star legendary to see how well does his boulder throw stun really work. Next up is Miguel. So he has a knock-up in the air for 1 second. That would be why you would have Miguel on your team. It is a 9-second cooldown for a 1-second knock-up. And I don't know how this would scale. If I had to guess, I would assume this would go to 3 seconds. And this would go up to maybe 100%, so you'd have a 4-second knock-up on a 9-second cooldown. So he's okay. Again, I didn't use him. It really depends on who you get. I wouldn't really write home about Miguel. I mean, if you don't have any other warriors, Miguel is basically a middling hero that you would use and then replace. He doesn't stand out in any way. Now, Leonidas, he has a 30-second paralyze, and I believe this will go up to 70% for 3 seconds. and this would go up to 5 seconds. So he's going to have an 8-second paralyze with 70% that he can do every 9 seconds. So again, Leonidas could potentially become a very crowd-controlling character, but that's towards the late game. In the early game, you would just use him, and I don't even think I didn't use him either. You would just use him until you found something better. But again, the long-term potential of Leonidas is undecided at this time. Randolph is in a similar boat because he has 30% for 3 seconds. So it was... Okay, so they're equivalent. Randolph is in the same boat, though, because again, stunning in the very late game, your castle can't really take hits, so stunning enemies is your best way to basically win battles. But again, getting that stun up requires you to be pretty invested on the legendary side. So again, a 9-second cooldown, 5 seconds bonus to 3 seconds, so it's 70% for 8 seconds, so I believe these two are equivalent. But again, they both require a lot of investment to be able to be stun machines. And so Jackson is another knock-up hero, and so he's probably not worth it because that's 1 second. This probably goes up to 100%. This probably goes up to 3 seconds, so you're looking at 4 seconds. 9-second cooldown, 4-second knock-up. Probably not worth it compared to the other stuns and paralyzes we've seen. Alright, now let's look at A tier. Now clearly you can see just from how I've promoted everybody that A tier has a lot of potential. Evan, he will get up to a 90. This, I believe, goes up to 90%. Yes, this goes up to a 90% chance for 25% move speed, which this goes up to 60%. So you're looking at 85%. You have a 90% chance to reduce the move speed by 85% for 4 seconds, plus an additional. I think this only goes up by 1, so that's 6 seconds. So 10 seconds. So you have a 90% chance to reduce this move speed by 85% for 10 seconds on an 8-second cooldown. So clearly you can see that Evan is an amazing character late game for wave slowing. He's good in the middle game, in the mid game too. But eventually... So it really depends on your strategy, right? My strategy in mid game has been to let the auto battle go and basically overpower my opponents from a DPS standpoint. And the very, very late game, and when I say late game, I'm talking right now the people that I've seen that are employing like a legendary Evan strategy. They're at stage 6,000 plus. What they do is they use Evan to basically slow things in place. With 85% slow, things move very, very slowly towards you, and you can kind of strategically deal with things. But that requires a lot of micromanagement. I don't know how well he works on auto battle either. But that's something to keep in mind. But that said, all that said, Evan is a great choice because he's an A-tier hero, so that means you get plenty of shards. He actually doesn't have an S-tier equivalent, so if you actually did build Evan up, it's not like there's a better S-tier Evan that you would replace him with, so he's unique in that way. So he is a very good hero all around, and he's very good at wave delay. The next hero is Aisha. She is a situational early game to mid game hero. Again, her attack stat is very high, even though she's a support. She's exceptionally good at keeping your heroes alive earlier. I still use her, and I'm on wave like 4,000 on my main, 3,900 on my main account. So I still see potential in her. I am looking to replace her, but that gives you a hint of her longevity. And you also get 60 free shards from her when you do the 7-day thing. So you're guaranteed to get her. So there's no reason not to at least try her and see if she fits your playstyle. And when I added her onto my team, when I initially got her, not on my alt account, because my alt account I had so much experience with doing everything, I didn't have the problems I did. But on my main account, she was a game changer because all of a sudden my warriors could take hits, could soak damage, and could really do a lot more on the field. So again, you can't go wrong with going with Aisha, but as you get further in the game, you would look into replacing her and helping your warriors stand on their own. Now Xavier, clearly you know how much I favor Xavier, and while Adrian is better on paper, because Adrian is so hard to grow, because again, S tier heroes, it's harder to get shards for them. It's much easier to get shards for Xavier because number one, there's very few A tier heroes, so you'll end up getting a lot of Xavier shards. And number two is in the shop and stuff like that. Again, there's few 3-star heroes, so it's easy to get extra shards and stuff for him. And so it makes sense to grow Xavier as much as possible. You will eventually replace him, don't get me wrong, but so the equivalent of a legendary 5-star Xavier is a legendary 5-star epic Adrian. So you have to get Adrian all the way to legendary 1-star before you can even think about replacing Xavier. And I will tell you, if you're just going to hold out on Adrian, you're going to have a rough time ahead of you. Excuse me. And that's just because Xavier does so much damage, he has so much crowd control, he helps you out tremendously with defending the castle because he summons a huge plethora of troops on the field. So to sacrifice all that thinking, well, he's going to be a waste of my Ascension stones, I should hold out for Adrian, is kind of silly, because Xavier is really going to help you progress from early game all the way up to late game. And again, I would say late game, when I say late game, I'm probably talking wave 6,000. It's hard to say I'm not there yet, but that's the experience I've seen from other players. Next up is Ryan. So Ryan's interesting because he can permanently slow. But again, we're talking a legendary Ryan. This is a lot of investment, a lot of promotion. Outside of the box, he's good. But I would expect. But again, me personally, I don't invest heavily in warriors from early to mid game. Investing in someone with like Ryan is probably a late game thing, and he is similar to Evan in the sense that his slow will go up to 80 to 48 to about 73%. This will go up to 100%. Yeah, I think it's 100%, and it will last for 8 seconds. So he has an 8-second cooldown with an 8-second slow, so he will be able to permanently slow people at legendary status. Again, he's not a bad hero by any means. He's common, but again, as you can see from my alternate account, I don't invest too heavily in warriors because the damage really comes from your support, and you really just need to invest enough in your warriors just to keep things off the wall. So as long as your warriors aren't dying, you're in good shape, in my opinion. Now, this may change, but that's been the sentiment so far. And again, Blake has a knock-up, so that would go to 100%, 1 second. That would probably be 2.5 seconds. So 3.5 second knock-up, 8-second cooldown. He's not really your best controller, so considering he also has basically a crowd control thing, and he's not one of the best ones, I would say Blake is a kind of a pass. Okay, we talked about everybody in A tier. Now comes S tier. This is where things get interesting. Now, Gabriel, he was my first pull on my alt account. He's probably the best hero in the game. The reason being is because of how much he buffs your archers. So he increases their attack by 80% for 6 seconds, and increases their crit by 100%. And this will increase it by 2 seconds, so I imagine this goes up to 6 seconds total, to give this probably 16-second cooldown for 12 seconds, which is really good. It's not a perma buff, so it's not, you won't have this permanent buff, but this is a really strong character, and the reason he's so strong is because he buffs your archers. And if you look at my overpowered bow guide, you will easily see how it's easy to get your archers to be really strong. So having a really strong bow plus this makes your archers just extra deadly and will really help you clear a lot of waves. So if I had to pick number 1 hero overall, Gabriel. However, he's S tier, so it's going to be very hard. It's going to be a very long journey until you get to him. Christian. Now, I don't have Christian on my alt account, but he's a very good hero. A lot of people use him a lot from as soon as you get him to late game. The reason being is because of this. And he starts with this because he's 4 stars, so he will start with these 4 abilities. And this ability makes his basic attack deal area of effect damage. That just makes him do so much damage to a lot of different waves where things are stacked up together and stuff like that. And plus his barrage also does area attack damage. So all that working together plus Luke and Tristan buffing him, makes Christian really powerful because on any wave where there's a lot of little monsters or a lot of targets in one confined area, Christian just goes to town and blows everybody up with his rocket. So he is absolutely an amazing character. You won't regret investing in him, but you could really say that for most of S tier. Adrian is the same thing. She is a great hero. She's just going to grow slower than Xavier, but eventually when she gets legendary 1, if you had a 5-star legendary Xavier and a legendary 1-star Adrian will win every time. It depends on when you get her. Like if you get her early game, say goodbye to Logan. You won't need Carlos either. You could just use regular old Adrian for a long time. So again, she's a very good hero, but it's going to take you a long time. She's a long-term hero because it's going to take you a long time to get her to surpass Xavier. But when she surpasses Xavier, it's going to be a no-brainer to use her every time. Lucas is a very situational hero, and the problem is this cooldown is very long, and it knocks back to it has a 40% chance for 2 seconds, and this goes up to 90%. So you can use this every 20 seconds to knock things back for 2 seconds, 90% of the time. So he's very situational. Again, he's S tier though, so if you get him, he's good. I mean, obviously I'm using him on my alt account, but I think that other S tier heroes are generally better than him. But again, if you have him, use him. Sofia. Sofia is an extremely situational hero that we don't know how good she is. And that's because, again, she's one that, because she's so unique, you really have to rank her up first. And the problem is, if you auto-battle with Sofia, she's going to immediately start healing the castle that has taken no damage. So with her healing the castle that has taken no damage, right off the bat, I mean, she basically, if you're going to use Sofia, you're going to either use her to be a manual character, so you're going to play the wave manually, which there's nothing wrong with that, or you might use her in King's Ruins. So King's Ruins, I think, is where she would really excel. But when I tried her in King's Ruins, she was so underwhelming because her attack was so low. And this was even after getting her up to level 700. So to make Sofia good, you're going to have to invest a lot in her. And the reason you would invest a lot in her is to make King's Ruins easier. So, that's what I would take in mind with Sofia. I'm sure if you get her early game, she's amazing. But long term, I would say she's extremely situational, and she takes a lot of investment. She does have this Blessing 1, where 4% of the hero's defense is applied to the castle's defense. And this is what has taught me that castle defense means practically nothing. Because I actually got her up, and I got her. I took her, and she had like 120 defense. No, sorry, she had 3,000 defense, which means she gave the castle 120 defense. And I thought it would be game-changing. It didn't seem very game-changing. In fact, it barely seemed like it did anything at all. I don't know if it's because where I'm at in the game, stuff hits the castle wall for like 10,000. So if it hits it for 10,000 and you take 120 damage off, that's like big whoop. And I'm not saying that's how defense works, but we don't know how it works. At least when I used her, it wasn't very useful. So if you have a different experience with Sofia, please let me know. Camila, she is very good. She is basically... Her attack is similar to Mason. She attacks in a line. However, her debuff is she debuffs the attack of the enemies. So, very different kind of hero. But I mean, she's still really good. She does a lot of damage because she attacks in a whole line. She has the potential to do, tons of damage and debuff things and stuff like that. I use her because, again, she does about a boatload of damage. This Flame Explosion 1 is very strong. Now, whether or not you would use her long-term, most groups I think do, because she does so much damage, and this is such a short cooldown. Again, this is a 6-second cooldown, so she'll be lighting up the field very frequently. So again, great hero in my estimation, but we don't know what her long-term potential is. As far as I can tell, the flame explosions, or the attack debuff, doesn't seem that great so far, but I could be wrong. We really have to see how that shakes out. Herald? Herald is an awesome hero, and it is because he is a stunner. That's what makes him so awesome. He is basically a more powerful version of Mason. But the difference between Herald and Mason is Herald is an attack. He's like a bigger Ellie attack. So he is a big circle you put down and he strikes him with lightning. So, and his lightning will stun for 5 seconds. It's a 90% for 7 seconds, which is good. And it's an 8-second cooldown. So you could lock people down pretty well with Herald's stun. But again, he's S tier, so it's going to take you a while to get him up to Legendary. Daniel. So, I like Daniel as a warrior, but the reality is, since warriors in late game don't do a lot of damage, Daniel will not be very useful in the long term. In the short term, when you immediately get him, he's good because, again, he has a buff. It increases move speed, which you might be wondering, move speed doesn't sound that good, but the quicker your warriors are moving to targets and attacking them, it's the less time they're walking and more time they're doing DPS, so it is a good stat. But again, it's and this is a buff for crit too, so again, he does give a buff. But in the long term, like I said, the long term is, because of Gabriel, how strong your archers get, how Luke interacts, how Tristan interacts. When you add all those things together, support heroes vastly outcompete warriors. So using this warrior to buff your other warriors to do more damage, he eventually drops off and becomes less and yet less useful as time goes on. Alright, so there's Julian. He has a 7-second cooldown. This probably is a 90% for 1 second. And this probably goes up to 2.5 seconds. So 3.5 seconds stun for a 7-second cooldown. That's okay. Nothing to write home about. Again, again, what you're looking for with heroes is to delay, so he's not, he doesn't stand out in that regard. Anthony. So this actually goes to 100%, paralyzed for 2 seconds. This will go up to 5, so this will be a 7-second paralyzed, 100%, on a 7-second cooldown. So Anthony, at a top level, should theoretically be able to stun lock whoever he hits with Thunderclap in place. That can be extremely powerful, especially if he gets on the right group and just stun locks him. So Anthony, he's very, very likely to be an extremely powerful hero in the end. Vincent, again, we don't know how good reducing the defense is, because we don't really know how much defense the enemies necessarily have. So this, again, if you get him and you don't have any other, none of your other warriors can go up to level 700, Vincent will be great. But Vincent doesn't have a crowd control effect on his weapons, so whether or not he's really going to scale well into late game, we don't know. Broderick is kind of the same thing. He has the burn effect. I would rank Broderick even lower because so many of the other heroes, you have Tristan, who's a great hero who's going to give the burn effect. You have Camila, great hero, going to give the burn effect. His burn effect has a higher chance, but it kind of makes him redundant to other heroes. I mean, he's still a good hero. Don't get me wrong. Like, a lot of these heroes are good, but if you have all the heroes, you're looking for the best. So let's not conflate those two things. But again, since his debuff isn't special, he doesn't stun, not really a great hero in the top end of the game, but he can be an exceptional hero when you get him. So that covers all the heroes. So early game, any S tier hero that you get will be amazing, just because you can promote them up to 700 without investing any Ascension stones. The S tier heroes can get outpaced by A tier heroes just because A tier heroes get more shards, and we're going to look at that in a second. And from A tier heroes, Xavier and Evan are awesome. You can use them all the way to the end of the game. Well, you can use Xavier almost to the end of the game. You can use Xavier up until you get Adrian promoted to replace Xavier. But that's a really long time. That's a very long-term strategy, at least based on how many shards I'm getting for Adrian. Ryan is very interesting with the potential because he has permanent slow. Aisha is very useful early to mid-game because she heals your heroes. Tristan, A+ hero, he's awesome. Carlos, he gets replaced. Austin, I'm undecided about him because we don't know how his stun plays out. His stun could be potentially very strong. Leonidas, extremely strong paralyze, could maybe be very good at locking enemies down. I think Miguel, was he? No, he's a knockup. So generally heroes that do the knockup just aren't as good. Randolph, again, he's a stun, and he's going to be a very long stun. So Randolph has a lot of potential too. And Jackson, he's a knockup. He doesn't have as much potential. So out of B tier, you have Tristram. Austin is an unknown. Leonidas is an unknown, and Randolph is an unknown. Because we don't really know what their full potential could be at the long tail of the game. Then finally, C tier. Of course, Luke. And then again, the same thing. It's Mason and Diego. We don't know how good they are. We know for sure that Logan's not any good, and Ellie's not any good. And Brian will be good early game, but he will lose potency later. So that kind of covers all the heroes. And again, part of this game is just knowing where to spend your Ascension stones and what heroes can really bring you long term. So, I mean, you can look at my group and you can see that even though I have these, like I have promoted Harold. And I definitely will continue to promote Harold and even Anthony just because of how strong they are. Lucas, he's good for where he's at. And this might be more useful to see this on my main account. But we will be seeing that account going forward. And let's look at the fountain. Because the fountain also dictates how you get heroes. So you can actually go in here to see the summoning rates. And you know that we only do ultra summon. Sorry, that was really hard to get it to stand still. So the way ultra summons works is you have a 5% chance for a shard and a 0.5% of getting the whole S tier hero. With A heroes, you have 20% shards, 2% hero. B is 25% shards, 4% heroes. And C is 42% shard, 1.5% heroes. Yeah, so that adds up okay. So that's about how I was just double checking their math to make sure they weren't doing anything funny. So this is why you do ultra summons, because if you did greater summons, even though greater summons are cheaper, you don't get any chance of getting a whole S tier hero. You have a lower chance of getting the shards that are really good, and you have a much larger chance of getting C tier shards which just aren't as good. But this means that you will get plenty of A tier shards. So that's why it's so easy to promote your A tier, and most of the A tier heroes are really good. Aisha's the only one that I would say, well, once you get her probably to uncommon, you probably would look at not needing to promote her anymore, because you know that eventually you're going to retire her once your warriors get caught up. I didn't even realize that they had the step charts for this whole thing. Okay, that's interesting. Huh. Well, this is good to know. We can look at gear summoning another time. But basically every step it moves the tier list up. That's why you would delay. And the first 3 or so are the first 3 steps set the pattern for later. So that covers everything. Now please like this video if you found it informative. If you had any questions, please write something in the comments. And we also have to remember this is only for the 1.19 version of the game, so they could come in and change the heroes at any time. I know that they did They did buff Sofia. They buffed Sofia, and how they changed her was they gave her a normal attack. But that didn't really. I keep looking to see if I was hoping that we'd talk about Sofia, but it didn't fundamentally change her. For early game, any S tier hero is probably going to be leagues ahead of anyone just because they have a level cap of 700. A tier heroes again, Evan, Xavier, and Ryan are all really good heroes. Evan and Ryan have a lot of crowd control, and Xavier is going to be your go-to for summoning until Adrian surpasses him. B tier again, you're looking at Tristan, maybe Leonidas and Randolph for Warriors, and possibly Austin. Austin, Leonidas, and Randolph would again be later game heroes, but I would definitely expect everyone to focus on Tristan and Luke. And out of C tier, Ellie isn't any good, Logan isn't any good, Mason is questionable. We're trying to figure that out, and Diego is also we theorize Diego is also good. So once again, I want to thank you for watching this video. I hope you found it informative. I know it was a little long, but I wanted to cover a lot of different information. I do link to the Reddit and the Discord, and both the Reddit and Discord do have tier lists of heroes in them. So if you want to come back and see how things have changed, I will put the version of this in the video because at any point in time, the game could change and render the advice I'd given you meaningless. So once again, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. And again, if you have any questions, please leave something in the comments. Thank you.